Rugby School is a private, co-educational day and boarding school in Rugby, Warwickshire, England. It is one of the oldest private schools in Britain. In many ways the stereotype of the English public school is a reworking of Thomas Arnold's Rugby. It is one of the original 7 English public schools defined by the Public Schools Act 1868. Floreat Rugby is the traditional school song. Rugby School enrolls boarding and day students, with a total student enrollment of 800 in day student grades 4 to 12. For the academic year 2015-16, Rugby charges boarders up to £10,995 per term, making it the 39th most expensive HMC boarding school. Rugby School was purportedly the birthplace of rugby football. In 1845, 3 rugby school pupils produced the first written rules of the rugby style of game. History. Early history. Rugby School was founded in 1567 as a provision in the will of Lawrence Sherriff, who had made his fortune supplying groceries to Queen Elizabeth I of England. Since Lawrence Sherriff lived in Rugby and the neighbouring Browns Over, the school was intended to be a free grammar school for the boys of those towns. Up to 1667, the school remained in comparative obscurity. Its history during the trying period is characterized mainly by a series of lawsuits between descendants of the founder, who tried to defeat the intentions of the testator, and the masters and trustees, who tried to carry them out. A final decision was handed down in 1667, confirming the findings of a commission in favor of the trust, and henceforth the school maintained a steady growth. Academic life. Pupils beginning rugby in the F block study various subjects. This is continued through to D block. The school then provides standard A levels in 29 subjects. Students at this stage have the choice of taking 3 or 4 subjects and are also offered the opportunity to take an extended project. Scholarships. The governing body provides financial benefits with school fees to families unable to afford them. Parents of pupils who are given a scholarship are capable of obtaining a 10% fee deduction, although more than one scholarship can be awarded to one student. Non-academic school life. Rugby School claimed they aim to give pupils more than education, with the new tagline being "the whole person, the whole point." The school has many traditions, including 2 annual carol services, as well as the pushcart race, an event which the entire school competes in, with each house designing, constructing and racing their own cart. The school has 3 magazines: The Meteor, The Boomer and Quad. Growth. It was no longer desirable to have only local boys attending, and the nature of the school shifted, and so a new school, Lawrence Sherriff Grammar School, was founded in 1878 to continue Lawrence Sherriff's original intentions. That school receives a substantial proportion of the endowment income from Lawrence Sherriff's estate every year. The core of the school was completed in 1815 and is built around the old quad, with its Georgian architecture. Especially notable rooms are the upper bench, the old hall of schoolhouse, and the old big school. Thomas Hughes once carved his name onto the hands of the school clock, situated on a tower above the old quad. The polychromatic school chapel, new quadrangle, temple reading room, Macready Theatre and gymnasium were designed by the well-known Victorian Gothic Revival architect William Butterfield in 1875, and the smaller memorial chapel was dedicated in 1922. By the 20th century, Rugby expanded and new buildings were built inspired by this Edwardian era. The Temple Speech Room, named after former Headmaster and Archbishop of Canterbury Frederick Temple, and now used for whole school assemblies, speech days, concerts, musicals, and BBC Mastermind. Oak-panelled walls boast the portrait portraits of illustrious alumni, including Neville Chamberlain holding his piece of paper. Between the wars, the Memorial Chapel, the music schools and a new sanatorium appeared. Cartel. In 2005, Rugby School was one of 50 of the country's leading independent schools which were found guilty of running an illegal price-fixing cartel which had allowed them to drive up fees for thousands of parents. Each school was required to pay a nominal penalty of £10,000 and all agreed to make ex gratia payments totaling £3 million into a trust, designed to benefit pupils who attended the schools during the period in respect of which fee information was shared. However, Mrs. Jean Scott, the head of the Independent Schools Council, said that independent schools had always been exempt from anti-cartel rules applied to business, were following a long-established procedure in sharing the information with each other, and that they were unaware of the change to the law. She wrote to John Vickers, the Office Director General, saying, "They are not a group of businessmen meeting behind closed doors to fix the price of the products to the disadvantage of the consumer. They are schools that have quite openly continued to follow a long-established practice because they were unaware that the law had changed." Headmasters. Thomas Arnold. Rugby's most famous headmaster was Thomas Arnold. Appointed in 1828, he executed many reforms to the school curriculum and administration. Arnold's reputation and the school's reputation was immortalized through Thomas Hughes' book Tom Brown's School Days. David Newsom writes about the new educational methods employed by Arnold in his book, Godliness and Good Learning. He calls the morality practiced at Arnold's school muscular Christianity. Arnold had three principles: religious and moral principle, gentlemanly conduct and academic performance. Dr. George Most, former professor of history in University of Wisconsin-Madison, lectured on Arnold's time at Rugby. According to Most, Thomas Arnold created an institution which fused religious and moral principles, gentlemanly conduct, and learning based on self-discipline. These morals were socially enforced through the gospel of work. The object of education was to produce the Christian gentleman, a man with good outward appearance, playful but earnest, industrious, manly, honest, virginal, pure, innocent, and responsible. John Percival. In 1888, the appointment of Marie Bethel Burke Clark by Percival was the first appointment of a female teacher in an English boys' public school and the first time shorthand had been taught in any such school. The shorthand course was popular with 100 boys in the classes. William Webb Ellis. The game of rugby football owes its name to the school. The legend of William Webb Ellis and the origin of the game is commemorated by a plaque. The story has been known to be a myth since it was investigated by the Old Rugbyian Society in 1895. There were no standard rules for football in Webb Ellis's time at Rugby, and most varieties involved carrying the ball. The games played at Rugby were organized by the pupils and not the masters, the rules being a matter of custom and not written down. They were frequently changed and modified with each new intake of students. The sole source of the story is Matthew Bloxham, a former pupil but not a contemporary of Webb Ellis. In October 1876, 4 years after the death of Webb Ellis, in a letter to the school newspaper The Meteor, he quotes an unknown friend relating the story to him. He elaborated on the story 4 years later in another letter to The Meteor, but shed no further light on its source. Richard Linden, a boot and shoemaker who had premises across the street from the school's main entrance in Lawrence Sheriff Street, is credited with the invention of the oval rugby ball, the rubber inflatable bladder and the brass hand pump. Houses. Rugby School has both day and boarding pupils, the latter in the majority. Originally it was for boys only, but girls have been admitted to the sixth form since 1975. It went fully co-educational in 1995. The school community is divided into houses. There is also a co-educational day house for 11+ admission, called Marshall House. It is much smaller than the other main school houses. Information. Age range 11 to 18. Day pupils 77 boys, 64 girls. Annual boarding fee £32,025. Annual day fee £20,094. Full boarding pupils 369 boys, 296 girls. Annual full boarding fees £31,245. Total pupils 446 boys, 360 girls. Including sixth form, fare 194 boys, 168 girls. Staff numbers 100 full-time, 9 part-time. Method of entry: common entrance, interview, scholarship or bursary exam. Professional affiliations: HMC, religious affiliation, Church of England. Oxbridge acceptance percentage 10.4%. Alumni. There have been a number of notable old rugbyians, including the purported father of the sport of rugby William Webb Ellis, the inventor of Australian rules football Tom Wills, the war poets Rupert Brooke and John Gillespie Magee, Jr., Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain, author and mathematician Lewis Carroll, poet and cultural critic Matthew Arnold, the author and social critic Salman Rushdie, and the Irish writer and Republican Francis Stewart. Matthew Arnold's father, Thomas Arnold, was a headmaster of the school. Anna Sevens-a-side rugby team was invited to compete in the inaugural Old Boys Sevens tournament in June 2010, hosted by the Old Silhillians, the former Pupils Association of Solihull School. Philip Henry Barr, a zoologist and medical doctor, World War I veteran, was president of both Royal Society of Tropical Medicine and Hygiene and Medical Society of London, and vice president of the British Ornithologists' Union. See also category: people educated at Rugby School. Rugbyian Society. The Rugbyian Society is for former pupils at the school. An old rugbyian is sometimes referred to as an oar. The purposes of the society are to encourage and help rugbyians in interacting with each other and to strengthen the ties between oars and the school. In 2010, the rugbyians reached the semi-finals of the public school's Old Boys Sevens tournament, hosted by the Old Silhillians to celebrate the 450th anniversary of fellow Warwickshire public school, Solihull School. Rugby Fives. Rugby Fives is a handball game, similar to squash, played in an enclosed court. It has similarities with Winchester Fives and Eton Fives. It is most commonly believed to be derived from Wessex Fives, a game played by Thomas Arnold, headmaster of rugby, who had played Wessex Fives when a boy at Lord Weymouth's Grammar, now Warminster School. The open court of Wessex Fives, built in 1787, is still in existence at Warminster School, although it has fallen out of regular use. Rugby Fives is played between two players or between two teams of 2 players each, the aim being to hit the ball above a bar across the front wall in such a way that the opposition cannot return it before a second bounce. The ball is slightly larger than a golf ball, leather-coated and hard. Players wear leather-padded gloves on both hands, with which they hit the ball. Rugby Fives continues to have a good following, with tournaments being run nationwide, presided over by the Rugby Fives Association.